from Social Tech Trust. And today I'm actually not going to talk about AI, funnily enough, but I am going to talk about for good. And I'm going to talk about funding for good and something new that we are doing with Social Tech Trust, that's driven by Social Tech Trust, and that's kind of creating an innovative way of financing for good ventures. Right, so that's the name of the presentation, and I hope that most of you have heard of the concept of zebras, and we will talk about them more today. I will talk about how the current financing system is failing the zebras and the way that hopefully we found to fix it. Disclaimer, I have to say that for legal reasons, but yes, please don't rely on this presentation as an advice to invest. If you do, please do consult your respective financial advisors. Just in case. Right, so a bunch of quotes, but I think they're really good. So the system is failing, and I think you all have seen it, and that's why you're sitting here now. The venture capital system is broken because it rewards quantitative equality, it rewards unsustainable growth, growth in valuation, and shareholder profit rather than the sustainability that we want. It chases after the unicorn concepts that all of us know, and we know that the problems that come for growing too fast, that we have seen in the news over the last kind of months and years, really. Caveat, unicorns are not all bad, but that's only a certain part and a small part of the investable universe. So we'll talk about everyone the rest. So arguably, we actually got the unicorns as a definition wrong, because unicorns meant to be something that make you go WTF. It's not meant to be something that make you go, oh my god, it's a 1 billion valuation. So that's the premise. The premise is that the system is failing the real unicorns. So, what are the problems with the system? I'm sure there's many, but I try to summarize a few. One-sided definition of success. As I mentioned, the current system rewards the growth and the valuation that everyone is after, and pressure on the actual funders rather than the sustainability of the venture. The failure to account for the third axis and impacts. And hopefully most of you, if you are here, are trying to do something impactful and for good. And a lot of the current funding out there does not actually account for that. One-sided definition of impact. I never actually thought about it, but that's probably true, and you probably would have seen it's true. If you're not doing some of the obvious impactful things, it's ever so more difficult to actually find the funding out there. The moment you're socially impactful, no, people don't even acknowledge that it is a real impact. Outdated and inadequate financial instruments, the equity and debt. There are a few in between, arguably, like the advanced subscription and convertible notes, but ultimately they're all the same. And that's what I'm going to talk about. The gaps and how we can fill them. So the big question is, what are the companies between the for-profit and non-for-profit, the real unicorns, and how can we support them? So unicorns and zebras, as I promised, the familiar concept, hopefully, and hopefully familiar pictures. If not, do go to Zebras Unite. I find them quite amusing. So the problems obviously exist currently is that there is a specific definition of unicorns which is driven by valuation and by the market, and arguably the current system is actually making the real unicorns are trying to make the real difference stuck within the current system. So what are zebras? Zebras are businesses that are for sustainability, for working together and collaborating. They're not trying to be monopolistic. They believe in community. They're still for profit, but they're also for good. And the current aim is to develop the alternative business models within the community that will help zebras prosper. So the gap, as I mentioned in the start of financing, there's actually a twofold gap if you look at it. So the first gap is that there's a clear difference and definition between non-for-profits and for-profits. It is driven by government and the legal system, but the outcome is you have certain definitions and certain support for certain legal structures And especially if you're not for profit, you would qualify for certain support, and if the moment you are for profit, you actually won't. That's part of the issue. On the other hand, you have the for-profits, which also have a gap, and the gap is that you either have equity or you have debt. Equity, you will only qualify if you have the potential for the 10 times growth, and you have 100 million or whatever market, and you grow 10% month on month in your revenues. And that's all that VCs are after. That's it. They will have specific criteria, and that's that. On the other side, you have debt, which obviously is much cheaper, but also you actually need cash, and probably be a more mature business to actually qualify for that, because people are still risk averse. So, we are stuck with a gap in between, where what do just good, new, sustainable businesses do? Where do they go? And solutions. There's a number of researchers out there who are actually doing those solutions. And innovative finance is essential targeting those. Just a couple, to name a couple, are first loss guarantees, impact carry. I'm not going to talk about them. You can do the research if you want. Self-liquidating instruments, and finally, revenue-based equity and loans. And revenue-based equity is something that we found and we think is going to be useful and will solve, or has the potential to solve, the current problem. Revenue-based equity is actually beneficial for both funders and founders, because for founders, it relieves the pressure that usually venture capitalists are asking to grow in size and to grow in valuation. And instead, it actually allows businesses to focus on the sustainability, on financial sustainability, on their impact, and aligns the founder focus. On the other hand, funds like us, we have our own investors, we have our own responsibilities, but what this structure actually allows us is also to create value for our investors, so it's actually, believe it or not, win-win. So what's currently happening in the market, that's a link. If you guys want, I can send it around. But basically, the funds like this already exist. And there's a list of about 20 and 30 of them in this article. However, they're all US-based. And unfortunately for us, or fortunately, US are generally the driver in this research. However, not much is happening in Europe right now. I'm sure we're not the only ones who are looking at that, but it's still very new here. So hence, enter social tech ventures. After having identified the gap, I previously talked about in social tech trust, having worked with sustainable and for-profit ventures over the last 10 years, we feel that this model and this mechanism can actually address this gap. So, revenue-based equity has a number of advantages. One of them, the first one, is it's cheaper than equity. I can explain all of them more, but you probably have heard that you need to be making at least 10 times 10 times returns for a venture capitalist to even look at you. However, in the revenue-based model, redeemable equity, you only have between 2 and 5 times, depending on their model, that you need to return. It's more flexible than debt because it's actually based on your flexible revenues. Just like any new business, your revenues fluctuate month on month, and that allows for flexibility. It can be invested off funding cycle, so it's actually amazing. You don't need to wait for people, you don't need to rush people. This can be done at absolutely any point because it's not based on evaluation. It allows you to retain ownership. I'm not going to get into structure now, we can discuss more, but the idea is that you basically buy back your own equity. And what we find, unfortunately, many ventures don't understand, especially in the very early days, is that equity is the most important, most expensive assets that they have if they want to be successful, and of course all of them do. So as easily and eagerly as they give away equity in the beginning, as much and as expensive it is to part with it later on. So this product actually allows you to buy back your equity. It does not focus on the unicorn valuation growth, as I mentioned. It actually focuses either on financial sustainability and aligns founder interest because it depends on growing the revenues and pushing the financial sustainability and the profitability of the business. And ultimately, the success returns for either a founder or funder does not depend on a liquidity event. That's yet another pressure that a lot of ventures have from their venture investors. That's another very important and interesting link. From a perspective of one of the ventures out there who have received an instrument like that, the reason why they decided to go for their instrument and their feedback. But of course, there's some disadvantages, trying to be open and transparent here. So you have, it is only suitable for businesses that want to make revenues and are on a clear path to generating recurring revenues and financial sustainability. So you have to want to be for profit. It does utilize cash that can otherwise be used for the future growth, invested. However, it's still significantly cheaper in terms of how much you have to give away than the normal equity. The risk share does decrease as instrument gets repaid, because ultimately you buy yourself out, but we feel that the advantage of actually getting more equity back or not giving away your equity overruns that. And ultimately the biggest thing, as with everything new, is the fact that it's new and unknown. People are always scared of new. However, we feel that that's not at a disadvantage big enough. So, of course, there's always risks with anything new and with anything really in life, but we feel that the rewards are significantly higher. So, we do feel that the risks are worth it, and hopefully we're ready to welcome the next zebras. Thank you.